Friends, we have to talk about a nuclear crisis that nobody seems to be talking about. And this is a very, very big deal. Now, when you talk about the people who are really, really in the know, like people who are running the government, they know this. But people out here like you and I, we're not talking about this. And, well, part of it is that we can't really do anything about it. But this is a major situation. Bear country out there, the place that's fighting with Eastern Europe, has the world in a really tight spot. And it has to do with nuclear fuel. We're talking about uranium. And the export ban that they have on their uranium is desperately needed in the United States. There's a reason why some in the government are already panicking. President Trump has issued emergency orders that are just starting to be acted on. It seems like it's too little, too late. Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Poplar Report. I'm Steve Poplar. I'm an accountant by trade. And these are the things the mainstream media just won't talk about. Go ahead. Google it. Google the uranium shortage. There's some people investing in uranium because they see the shortage there. But when you talk about like what is happening with just that nuclear power plants are going to run out of fuel, nobody's talking about it. Now, to give you some concept of like how big of a deal this is, about 18.6% of the U.S. electricity in 2023 were generated using nuclear power plants. When you look at other countries like France and some other nuclear powers, they use quite a few electric generators that run on uranium. Now, China has been building nuclear power plants like it's going out of style. India is trying to build as many nuclear power plants as they can, but it's going to take some time for them to kind of catch up. But we got all this happening, but we need to get back to where does the uranium come from? Back in the day, the United States used to mine quite a bit of uranium, but nowadays, most of it comes from Brics and brick-friendly countries. How much so? Well, let's see here. 43% of the world's uranium happens to be mined in Kazakhstan. And if you're like, is that Brics aligned? Yes. Yes, that is Brics aligned. That's like Russia light. Okay? Kazakhstan is so deeply enmeshed with the CIS that it's basically Russia. Okay? Kazakhstan, 43%. Now, Bear Country itself is 5%. And then China is 3%. So you roll all that together and you're looking at 58% of the world's uranium is mined in Brics or Brics-aligned countries. Now, there's some other countries that have pretty sizable holdings. Canada mines about 14%. Namibia, a country you think about so very often, 11%. Now, they're kind of aligned with France, and France kind of has them in their pocket. But if somebody were to come along, like China or Russia, and to kind of sway them into their new sphere of influence, that's 11%. It goes from 58% controlled to 69% controlled. That's kind of a big deal there. So you can see how this is not so good. Now, how much does the United States produce? Of the world's uranium, the United States produces 0.15%. That's not 15%. That's not even 1.5%. We're talking 0.15%. A fraction so small, the only reason they show up on the list is because it's the United States. And of course, the United States needs to show up on the list. Even if we produce about 75 tons of uranium ore last year. And the year before that, it was an embarrassing like 25 tons. So 0.05% the previous year. Absolutely ridiculous. Now, just to give you a sense of that, we produce approximately 0.4% of the uranium that we need to run our reactors. Which, in a perfect world where we're all just trading resources around freely and there's no massive sanctions against any countries, that would not be a serious problem. But the United States decided to sanction Russia and to put on them a bunch of export controls. So basically, the United States is not allowed to import any uranium from Bear Country unless the United States issues a waiver. To which Bear Country looked at the United States and says, if you want to ban our uranium, that's fine. We'll ban exporting our uranium to you. So there's no waivers. We don't have to play those games, because that's exactly what was going to happen. It's just kind of like, we're just going to keep issuing waivers. We're going to do this social posturing, like we're sanctioning them. And then we just kind of have a bunch of waivers to kind of make it so that's not a problem. Well, Bear Country is like, no, if you're gonna do it, let's do it. Yeah, just because Bear Country, well, you said 5%, right? They make 5% of the world's uranium, produce it. Yeah, but Bear Country enriches about 40%. Oh, where does all that Kazakh uranium go? Most of it goes into Russia? Yeah, that's basically what happens. The remaining uranium ore, where does that go? Goes to China. China produces about 17% of the world's enriched uranium because they got all those nuclear power plants down there, and they're kind of stockpiling that as well. They got to power their nuclear power plants because, I mean, that's the only way you can make plutonium, which you need for your nuclear weapons program, which China is rapidly ramping up. But that's a whole nother topic. China building nuclear weapons while the United States has nuclear weapons that are like 40 years old. Yeah. If we were to go out to a Patriot missile battery where we have nuclear weapons that are going to lift off, fly all the way around the world, and land somewhere in Bear Country or China or someone else and go kablooey. They've been sitting in their silos for 40 years. Now, to give you some idea of what we're talking about here, I'm about 40 years old. And everything with me doesn't work anymore. And I haven't been sitting in a silo for that many years. Now, I know they pull them out of the silos, they refurbish them, and they change some of the gizmos on them and stuff like that. But still, when you have an airframe, particularly a single-use rocket, that is 40 years old, there's bound to be some problems. Yeah? Our nuclear weapons are old. We're not talking about the Ohio ballistic missile submarines. That was a whole nother video I did a while back. But the fact that one of our legs are a nuclear triad depends on technology that we developed in the 60s and 70s with the nuclear missile submarines is another topic. Anyway, the problem is that Bear Country, who makes 40% of the world's enriched uranium, won't let the United States import any of that. And China is also not letting the United States import any of its enriched uranium. So where exactly is the United States going to get all this enriched uranium in order to, run our nuclear power plants? And if you're like, well, Steve, we're going to be dependent upon the Europeans. And yeah, I know you're thinking the same thing I am, which is that doesn't sound like a good plan. We're dependent upon the Canadians and the Europeans. Now, we're not directly related, dependent on the Canadians. Basically, the Canadians ship that mostly over to Europe. Europe enriches it, and then, yeah. Anyway, so all that gets spat back out, and the United States has to import the uranium to run about 18.6% of our power grid. Now, go back a few years to 2019, and it was at 20%. We've been kind of losing some of the capacity, nuclear capacity in the United States, and we've been building other power plants and stuff like that as the needs of our grid have expanded. But just rounded off to 20% of our power grid is reliant upon a fuel that we don't have here in the United States. Now, it's not that we can't mine it. We used to mine it, and we could mine it again, but there's this environmental regulation stupid agency out there. And they're just like, their qualification for a new uranium mine is no. Doesn't matter, no. We're just not doing that. Just think about how they respond to like a new oil well, which is like probably no, and we're gonna have to find a way to say no to you. When it's a uranium mine, it's just like no, but we're gonna make it take as long as possible. These environmental studies for a potential uranium mine would usually take years and years and usually come back with a no. We just had the fastest environmental approval assessment for a new uranium mine ever out in Utah. The environmental review was fast-tracked. They were ordered to make a decision within 2 weeks, 14 days. They came back within 11 days and approved the mine. That's pretty efficient. Now they're reopening an old uranium mine, and then they're opening up a new uranium mine as part of that project, that joint project. Now, currently we have 3 uranium mines open inside the United States, but they're pretty small. This will actually be fairly, when in full production, it'll be bigger than the 3 mines that we have operating currently, which some years we're producing 25 metric tons, or not metric tons, 25 tons, real tons, of uranium ore compared to, 75 in 2023. Who knows what it is each year. But the fact that that's so small of a number that we have to start using decimal points in our percentages should tell you how little uranium that the United States is really producing. It's mission critical. We need to have our own uranium supply for our nuclear-powered submarines, our nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. Yeah, we need a little bit for that. And then we also need them for our nuclear weapons. We need them for our nuclear power plants. But we don't seem to be producing any uranium. And that is a mission critical item. So President Trump has fast-tracked the production of this mine, the environmental clearances and everything like that. The Trump administration realizes how over a barrel we truly are when it comes to uranium. Bear country, China, have closed their grip around the uranium supply. And if they can swing Namibia away from the French, we're going to have even more problems. Now, the French have been all in on nuclear power. They make like 80+% of their power grid is nuclear power. They've been all in on that. Japan used to be kind of all in, and then Fukushima happened. Fukushima was like a 1960s plant or something like that. It was a super old plant built by the Americans, and the Americans came in repeatedly and said, one, you're not keeping it up to the 1960s standard. You failed to keep these backups operational. And then they're just like, but the backups cost money, And so they just didn't do the backups. They're like, we don't really need them. There's already so much redundancy in the system. And then this giant tidal wave hit the power plant and knocked out the backup generators. And everyone said, where's the backup to the backups? And the answer was, we haven't kept them up because that would cost money. Well, what's the plan for if the backup generators get impacted and we've already shut down the main reactors? Like, what then? And the answer was, we don't know. And given that there are super old reactors, they just, they didn't have some of the containment features. They didn't have any of the passive backups that they do nowadays. It was just a whole mess. The Japanese did not upkeep their nuclear power plant. It was an old design, and just one thing after the next happened. That's kind of the thing that just doesn't happen with modern reactors anymore. And then the idea that you actually keep up the backups is important as well. And they just overlooked the potential for a tidal wave. They had a tidal wave wall. It wasn't Godzilla sized, okay? And the tidal wave went over the wall. And that just messed up everybody's day and destroyed a whole prefecture of Japan. Anyway, so they've kind of moved away from nuclear power, but they're starting to slowly move back in that direction again. We'll see if they actually build any nuclear power plants, but they've stopped shutting them down. So there's a movement there. Nuclear power is a wonderful thing as long as you don't mess it up, right? If you mess it up, then that's not good. But it's absolutely mission critical that us and our allies and our partners have the nuclear fuel that we need. And the fact that the Brics and allies have cornered so much of the nuclear fuel in the world, and the United States and our allies just refuse to build these mines and build these enrichment facilities is a big, big problem, a national security threat that hopefully we're going to start fixing. Back in the day, the United States was the largest producer of uranium ore. Not anymore. Not anymore. Environmental Protection Agency has protected us into oblivion now. We need to fix that. All right, friends, nobody else is talking about this, but I'm talking about it here. That's something that's going to be changed around. Australia is still producing a fair amount of uranium, which is good for them. They don't really use all that much, but I know we've imported some from them. But we need to really ramp up the United States production and encourage our allies to do the same so that we can get to where we need to go faster. All right, friends, thanks so much for joining with us. If you want to check out another video from this channel, there's one right up there. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you guys later. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report out.